He's doing double duty this week. God bless him. Stephen Yates was the first person. Like last night, we're like, we have to get Stephen Yates on the show today. He's with the American First Policy Institute Senior Fellow and also the China Policy Initiative Chair. He advised during the Bush administration, the former VP, and he joins us now. Mr. Yates, by Skype. I just want to get your reaction to that, particularly that last part, because this is not a surprise to this administration. This has been ongoing, and he seems entirely prepared. Stephen, your thoughts?
Ugh. It's just you watch this and it is so painful. Even the reporters trying to help him out by saying there's all these amazing sanctions that you put forward. They didn't actually detail anything. He said all these big things were going to happen. They never exactly said how. He says these are the biggest sanctions ever. Let's talk in a month. Does that mean he's going to step into Puxatawny Phil's hole and come back out in a month and have a conversation about a crisis that is unfolding now out of control? And not even being willing to talk about dealing with the leader of China. I mean, Putin was just in Beijing for the genocide games. He sat there like a Cheshire cat on the sidelines. They gave this love letter to each other that goes on multiple pages about how they're just the bestest of pals. And he comes away with that. It's almost as if Putin knew he was going to do this then. And surely she knew it also. And so why is it that Biden is talking about, I had all these phone calls and meetings, but can't even say whether he's talked to the leader of China, especially when everyone is concerned that after Afghanistan, this additional demonstration of weakness and ineptitude, how does it not provoke China to take adventurous steps in Asia, whether it's Taiwan or otherwise?
Now, that's a great point. We're talking with Stephen Yates. You can find him on Twitter at YatesComms. And to not, as you said, to not even, they were both at the genocide games together. There was this, I don't believe anything is leaked from the CCP's media. Nothing is leaked from any kind of Chinese newspaper. But the Hill ran a story, and I could tell they were feeling as dubious about it as I was, and you are. There was a leaked story, Stephen. There was a leaked story where apparently, the powers that be in Beijing were talking about how they wanted to have the media be very careful on how they wrote about what was happening with Ukraine and also any kind of framing with regards to Western powers because they wanted to be able to count on Russia's help to solve that Taiwan issue. What does that say to you?
Yeah, well, I'm sure. I mean, number one, if it was a leak, it was the dumbest, simplest, most boring leak ever because it's basically what everyone knows they're trying to do. They're trying to get Russia's help on that. They're playing on the Russia side of this fence. They have an important trade relationship with Ukraine. And so they don't necessarily want to be too open about it because they'd really like to keep access to all those super goodies that they have been getting out of Ukraine at rock bottom sale prices. And so the Chinese are playing what they always play. And yes, they want to pocket Russia's cooperation. I mean, I don't know if anyone subjected themselves to what should be the last gasp of the United Nations. But they had the Security Council with guess who is presiding over the Security Council? Russia. And so the poor Ukrainian ambassador is the only one that has the courage to say, hey, how about you just step out of here and call Vladimir and have him admit that he's shelling my country right now? Mm-hmm. And everyone else, they let Russia go on and conduct this meeting. And China's right there. As we know, with them at the Security Council, sanctions aren't really going to go very far. And the same questions, if we haven't learned anything, we should have learned, if you're going to play the sanctions game, why wouldn't you front load the sanctions and remove them when you got the outcome you sought? And if you hadn't learned that from this exchange, why wouldn't you be thinking about, should we put some sanctions in place on China so that we can remove them if they don't move against Taiwan? I mean, there's all kinds of common sense that just seems not able to penetrate this permanent bubble that's inside the Biden White House.
That's actually a really good point, talking with Stephen Yates about having some further sanctions prepared for China now, because I especially think because their economy might be a little bit more receptive. As I understand it, Russia over a year ago started moving away from the dollar as much as possible in preparation for sanctions, which was weird because Biden goes out there and he's like, these sanctions are going to be devastating, but also they don't work. Nothing that he said, Stephen, and I was listening, I was like looking at what it seems like the UK's penalties are way harsher than what ours are currently because he's not stopping any kind of crude trade. We get 7% of crude from Russia. We could easily double that, if we had Keystone or if we just, unleashed more domestic production offshore public and private land. But no sanctions on that. The other thing is, too, correct me if I'm incorrect on this, we're still relying on Russia to babysit Iran. How are we even, the messaging is weak. We say one thing, but yet, we're not going to stop trade here. We're not going to push as Johnson has been doing to get them off that payment system, SWIFT. And we're still going to kind of rely on them for Iran. So what's honestly changed?
Unfortunately, I don't think very much at all. And we still have that super interesting fellow named John Kerry flying around the world on his zero carbon jet, trying to remind everyone, after you're done with this civil war and stuff, how about we get back to climate change with Russia? He actually said just about that.
His jet runs on sanctimony.
This is the level of seriousness at the decision table right now. But it turns out that energy independence and self-defense really matter. And so Americans better get serious about that real fast. But we should be pressuring all of our allies and partners to do the same thing. And supply chains, energy, and self-defense. Those are the three vitamins the whole world needs to be taking a double dose of after this.
Two other questions remaining for you, and we're going to finish on Taiwan. But with NATO, Latvia apparently is saying, we're going to trigger Article 4. We're very concerned. We need to have discussions. He was asked during this presser a very interesting question about cyber attacks. And I know that there was a lot of discussion about this. If there is a cyber attack, I guess if you can prove that it originated with Russia, usually it's always a proxy group. Because a lot of people are wondering what Russia, I know Russia wants to avoid, I think, taking NATO on. However, I also think that they're, not just Putin, but the leadership over there recognize that this is probably one of the weakest moments in American foreign policy history. And so if they're going to do something, might as well do it now. Is there a concern that they could trigger that Article 5? And for those Article 4, for those listening, that's when the discussion of allies happens. And Article 5 is when, you come at one, you come at all. Is there a concern for that?
There is, very much so. And that's, I think, the number one spillover from this. With regard to Ukraine, we don't know whether this is the equivalent of a smash and grab by Putin, where he installs a friendly regime, pulls back, and basically has a friendly puppet on his periphery, and he's rebuilding the sphere of influence, as experts would call it. But it's very different with the Baltic states. Those are the three small ones, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, that have been very plucky in resisting Russia, very independent-minded, but they're in a very vulnerable military position. The cyber attacks that we've seen in Ukraine are sophisticated and seem to have had a big impact. Vladimir Putin has threatened anyone who intervenes in the Ukraine situation will be subject to things they have never seen before. What does that mean? It's an almost Trumpian statement in a way, but it's basically suggesting that something that is not in the conventional quiver could be coming our way. And so we better be serious about our pipeline security, our energy grid security, and our cyber security generally. But definitely the Baltic states, I think, are next on the menu for Vladimir Putin.
I'm going to insert one additional question on this, and I still want to finish on Taiwan, but in talking with Stephen Yates at YatesComs on Twitter, one of the discussions that I've seen, and this has been mainly limited to the right with some exceptions on the left, is that, this is a replay of 1938, this is a replay of, Czechoslovakia and Hitler. Do you believe that this motivation is limited to just rebuilding? You mentioned the sphere of influence, which is what made me think about this, rebuilding just the Soviet Republic, Soviet Union, USSR, and having that and just limiting the expansionism to that? Or is this where, Germany's going to fight the world and, to go into that joke? Is the expansionism, is the ambition beyond that, do you think? Because I think ultimately that's the crux of the issue.
Well, generally, these tyrants, they will go until they meet enough resistance that they feel like they need to stop or pull back. And so if they don't meet with resistance, which I think is how the administration and a lot of people goaded Putin into going for more than maybe he even had in mind with the Ukraine. But if you give them an open door and they don't meet with meaningful resistance, they just keep eating. And so we have to find a way of where that stop is. I think Poland is a major threshold. That if Russia really made a significant move against Poland, it's a completely different equation. The Baltic states, that's NATO. It's a big deal for the alliance to fail. But once you start getting into more of the Central Europe area, then it's a totally different ballgame. It's still Europe, and still Europe first needs to take care of themselves.
Right.
It's a hard thing, and people don't want to think about it. But if they won't, it's very difficult to expect the American people to come to the rescue again and again.
And it's so frustrating to just see all these reductive arguments, especially with some of the more War Inc. aligned folks on the right that say, well, if you're not for, doing more than just running guns or helping with armaments or, finances, if you're not down for sending boots on the ground, then you're like Hitler in 19. I mean, I'm just so tired of these arguments.
It's international wokeism. And so in domestically, everything is you're a racist or a white supremacist. And internationally, you're a Putin puppet or you're a Nazi or something like that. But all of those analogies are overused, tired. It turns out Putin's a bad guy in and of his own right. And Russia doing these things is bad enough in its own right. And he has way more tools at his disposal than the former Soviet Union did and that Germany ever had.
That's right. How much does this change for Taiwan? Because I really feel for the people of Taiwan right now. They're looking at all this thinking, ooh, man, what's going to happen with us? Because China started rattling that saber ever the harder just last night with this. And apparently there were more Chinese jets in Taiwanese airspace today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it should be a time where they push and people in the United States push to eliminate this strategic ambiguity approach to our relations there. I think their government there has been a little bit head in the sand with regard to energy independence. They have forsworn the nuclear option, even though they're an island without their own resources and subjected to a blockade potentially. They, in many ways, they would be willing to fight and grind it out. In that way, I think they're similar to the Ukrainians. They might be overrun in the short term, but the people of Taiwan were under Japanese occupation for 50 years, martial law for 30 years. They've come out the other end. They would another time. They would be hard to govern. But a lot of pain could come of that, not just for them, but for us, because our smart life would come to a halt, at least for a time, until we found some other way to reinvent that supply chain.
Yeah, that's true. Stephen Yates, as always, really appreciate you doing double duty and joining us for a second time this week. Folks, I suggest you go follow him on Twitter at YatesCom. Stephen, all the best. Thank you so much. I'm sure we'll have, there's going to be a lot more that happens just in the next 24 hours, too, so we'll be watching. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Dana. Take care.
You too.